Okay, so welcome to narcissism. That is what we are talking about today. Um, so I'm glad that I actually have a platform now where I can hear people talk. I love it when the people can chime in and we can have a little bit of a discussion going. So thank God for that. At the end of this, I will be sharing some of my services so that you'll see what I'm doing and you'd have the opportunity to get involved. But let's go on to the next slide here. So talking about narcissism, this is just one topic that's related to the big picture. These are my goals here. Hope to provide hope for the hopeless, sleep for the sleepless, and peace in the waiting. And if you stay until the end, I will share the #1 manipulation tactic used by narcissists. I don't know if y'all know what that is, but if you stay to the end, you'll find out. So I'm going to share just today what narcissism is, its origin, how to interact with a narcissist, and what not to do. Narcissism is a huge topic. There are just so many facets of it. So I needed to boil just this webinar down to this. This is what I chose for today to share. So this is all we're talking about today, but there's so much more. I'm sure I'll do webinars in the future where I'm sharing more, but for now, this is what we're going to discuss. I'm going to share a couple of stories. I don't know if you know, but my focus in my business right now has a name. I call the movement Raising Parents for Children, because I want to help raise parents emotionally for the benefit of their children. Although I know emotional healing will help my customers and all those around them too. At this time, I am only helping mothers. I don't see that changing unless God has other plans. I do have, if you have any fathers that need help and you need referral, I do have a referral that I can give on that. I don't know the person specifically, personally, but I found his website in my research, so I could provide that as an option. So today's topic related to estranged children is narcissism. Many of us that deal with estrangement or deal with parental alienation specifically are dealing with a narcissist in some form or another. So what is narcissism? Narcissism is self-centeredness arising from failure to distinguish the self from external objects, either in very young babies or as a feature of a mental disorder. Obviously, we are not discussing babies in this context. We are only interested in narcissism as a feature of a mental disorder. But obviously, young babies would only be able to really understand themselves because they can't comprehend that they're separate from others when they're that young. The origin of the term narcissism is the mythological story of Echo and Narcissus. I don't know if any of you have heard this story, but I had read through it previously. I just hadn't gone into detail with it. But I'm going to tell the story real quick. Just the first part of it I'll summarize, and then I will read the rest of the story. So in Greek mythology, Zeus played with the wood nymphs and made his wife jealous. She discovered one particular nymph named Echo, tricking her, in turn keeping her from reaching her husband. Upon her discovery of the trickery, Zeus's wife Hera cursed Echo so that she could only repeat the last word she hears. So the story goes on. One day, Echo spied a golden-haired youth hunting deer in the woods. The boy's name was Narcissus, and he was the most beautiful young man in the forest. All who looked upon Narcissus fell in love with him immediately, but he would have nothing to do with anyone for he was very conceited. Lost my place. When Echo first laid eyes upon Narcissus, her heart burned like the flame of a torch. She secretly followed him through the woods, loving him more with each step. She got closer and closer until finally Narcissus heard the leaves rustling. He whirled around and cried out, "Who's here?" From behind a tree, Echo repeated his last word, "Here." Narcissus looked about in wonder. "Who are you? Come to me," he said. Narcissus searched the woods but could not find the nymph. "Stop hiding. Let us meet," he shouted. "Let us meet," Echo cried. Then she stepped from behind the tree and rushed to embrace Narcissus. But the youth panicked when the nymph flung her arms around his neck. He pushed her away and shouted, "Leave me alone. I'd rather die than let you love me." "Love me," was all poor Echo could say as she watched Narcissus run from her through the woods. "Love me, love me, love me." Humiliated and filled with sorrow, Echo wandered the mountains until she found a lonely cave to live in. Meanwhile, Narcissus hunted in the woods, tending only to himself, until one day he discovered a hidden pool of water. The pool had a silvery smooth surface. No shepherds ever disturbed its waters, no goats or cattle, no birds or fallen leaves. Only the sun danced upon the still pond. Tired from hunting and eager to quench his thirst, Narcissus lay on his stomach and leaned over the water. But when he looked at the glassy surface, he saw someone staring back at him. Narcissus was spellbound. Gazing up at him from the pool were eyes like twin stars, framed by hair as golden as Apollo's and cheeks as smooth as ivory. But when he leaned down and tried to kiss the perfect lips, he kissed only spring water. When he reached out and tried to embrace this vision of beauty, he found no one there. "What love could be more cruel than this?" he cried. "When my lips kiss the beloved, they touch only water. When I reached for my beloved, I hold only water." Narcissus began to weep. When he wiped away his tears, the person in the water also wiped away tears. "Oh no," sobbed Narcissus. "I see the truth now. It's myself I weep for. I yearn for my own reflection." As Narcissus cried harder, the tears broke the glassy surface of the pool and caused his reflection to disappear. "Come back. Where did you go?" the youth cried. "I love you so much. At least stay and let me look upon you." Day after day, Narcissus stared at the water in love with his own reflection. He began to waste away from grief until one sad morning he felt himself dying. "Goodbye, my love," he shouted to his reflection. "Goodbye, my love," Echo cried to Narcissus from her cave deep in the woods. Then Narcissus took his last breath. After he died, the water nymphs and wood nymphs searched for his body, but all they found was a magnificently beautiful flower beside the hidden pool where the youth had once yearned for his own reflection. The flower had white petals and a yellow center, and from that time on, it was called Narcissus. And alas, poor Echo, desolate after Narcissus' death, did not eat or sleep. As she lay forlornly in her cave, all her beauty faded away and she became very thin until her voice was all that was left. Thereafter, the lonely voice of Echo was heard in the mountains, repeating the last words anyone said. So that's the story of Narcissist. He fell in love with himself and could not allow anyone else to love him. Okay. People with narcissistic tendencies might talk to you in a condescending manner, tell you that you're too sensitive or emotional, maybe call you a name like victim. I knew two people that use this exact word in the same exact context. They blame others for their mistakes and refuse to take ownership for their behaviors or mistakes. When you're met with people like this, the key is to not feed into their misconduct. They're looking for a rise from you. Don't give them that satisfaction, as this only inflates their already overinflated sense of self. So when you're interacting with a narcissist, it is important to stay calm and respectful, no drama, minimize emotion, especially emotional outbursts. Don't react to insults, belittling, or gaslighting. Listen and validate. It's okay to validate his or her feelings, but try to avoid flattery. So you can listen to them, you can validate them and let them know it's okay to feel what they're feeling, but there's no need to inflate their ego, give them a bigger head than they already have, because it's only going to feed their narcissism. And then advocate for yourself and enforce boundaries. They're bullies, so you definitely want to make sure that you're maintaining healthy personal boundaries with them, and just be firm with them. They are not going to like boundaries, by the way. They will not like it. They will feel like, or they will even express that it's disrespect, but that's actually not disrespect. It's respecting yourself, and they need to respect your boundaries. So it's just really important to it's kind of like staying neutral. You just have to remain neutral with them. The more neutral you remain with a narcissist, the better it's going to go. These are some things, what not to do. There are certain things that should be avoided when dealing with people with narcissistic tendencies. If you're dealing with a particular person on a regular basis, you'll most likely learn what to avoid, but we can review some general recommendations. Do not show emotion, especially strong emotional reaction, as I indicated earlier. Avoid pointing out flaws. So when we're interacting with narcissists, there are going to be any number of flaws that they're going to be glaring for the most part. But when you bring up their flaws, that's putting the narcissist on the defensive, and that will only prompt them and worsen the narcissistic behavior. Instead, remain as neutral as possible. Don't try to change them. We can't change people. We can only control how we choose to react and interact with people. The best influence is example. So as a bonus, I say the best influence is an example, but be warned. Even when I was setting a good example, one of the things the narcissist in my life did is take credit for my ideas or my accomplishments. It's common for a narcissist to live vicariously through others because they are incapable of supporting themselves emotionally, which overflows into other areas of their lives, such as their goals and achievements. They will literally throw their own children under the bus if they think it makes them look good, not even realizing that just the act of throwing their own children under the bus makes them look bad. It's kind of ridiculous. And I don't know, it's almost like it's really obvious to people who are close to them and who watch this behavior on a regular basis, but they are so hyper focused on making themselves look good that they don't even realize what they're actually doing is making themselves look bad. So it's fascinating to me. I've literally watched my ex-husband do this many times, and it was fascinating. I can tell this story real quick. There was one time, it was shortly before my divorce. I was kind of at the end of my rope with him. He had been laid off again. He had lost his job again. And I was working for State Farm at the time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can. I was working for State Farm at the time, and he came into my office one day. I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was to bring the boys in to see me. I can't really remember what it was, but I stood there while he was talking to my manager, and he literally told my manager that he was playing this game with his employer, trying to get his employer to lay him off so that he could be off work. I could not find a rock big enough to crawl under. It was so embarrassing. And I was thinking, do you actually think this is flattering to my manager? Like, what exactly do you think you're doing? I was kind of in shock. It was probably one of the straws that broke the camel's back, honestly. So just an example. Okay, so for the most part, that's what I have to share about narcissism. But I mean, we're not quite done. I'm gonna summarize here. and then we'll have some time to chat. So to summarize, when the goal is connection with a narcissist, we definitely need to be prepared for a challenge. While it's sometimes necessary to disconnect relationship with a narcissistic personality to protect yourself, many times that's not possible, such as in the case of co-parenting, marriage, or a coworker, or a family member. So when dealing with a narcissistic personality, it's best to remain calm. Take your time to process information, to formulate your responses, be direct and concise, and walk away to take a break if emotion begins going out of control. So I don't know how this slide will go over, but it's from a Saturday Night Live skit. Talk amongst yourselves. I don't know if anyone can relate to that, but does anyone have any questions? Anyone want to discuss something in particular?
So the tips is to stay as calm as possible. Don't get emotional. But how do you accomplish anything?
It is really hard. With my ex-husband, looking back on it, I wonder if I had an opening. There was a time when we were going through counseling. He is also known as, well, he's known as a covert narcissist, which is his tactics are more emotional and hidden, which is why it's covert. They also call them vulnerable narcissists. And the reason for that is I think that there was probably a time when he was sort of teetering where if I had handled it a certain way, he might have actually been able to let that wall down and let someone in. Of course, when I divorced, it sent him deeper into the darkness. But when you're dealing with an overt narcissist, that is someone that's usually pretty abusive. It's very in your face, out in the open. Usually there's a lot of yelling and screaming, a lot of times physical abuse. Those are a little harder to deal with, especially since it's even more difficult to stay calm. But yeah, it is. I would say the answer to your question lies in what I went through, and that is my ex-husband was getting to a point where he felt safe, he felt loved, he felt like he could just begin letting that wall down. So I think that that's really key. This is their defense mechanism. A narcissist is using narcissism as their defense mechanism to protect themselves. So if a person can bring them into that safe space, they will, and it'll be a process. Like that in and of itself, getting them to that point will be a process. And then it'll be a process just to have them begin to share and open up. So it's probably a very long process. I wish I had better news for you. It was eye-opening for me when I looked up parental alienation and Stockholm syndrome together. Knowing that I was dealing with a narcissist at that point, that drove it home to me. I have 2 articles on my website that talk about those 2 things together. And so I knew that my children were identifying with their father as a captive. That's basically what has happened, which is what Stockholm syndrome is. They're doing it to keep the peace. Yeah, it happened in Stockholm, Sweden in 1977 or something. The one article that I have in there has the history.
Was it Stockholm again? Stockholm?
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome.
syndrome regarding narcissism. We're all of us have a tendency to be that way.
We do.
But, it's part of us, as a human being, and as a sinner, basically. But a true a narcissistic person has definite personality traits.
Yeah, they live in it.
Yeah.
I think they have to meet, it's something like 5 out of 8 or 9 criteria that they go by in the psychology realm. Yeah, when I divorced my ex-husband, one of the things he said to me, he asked me when I asked him for the divorce, he said, like he was breaking down. He was clearly and visibly upset, and he said, "Have you given up on me?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I have." And at that point I had. I had the life sucked out of me for 15 years, and I was so spent at that point. I do wonder how things might have gone if I could have gotten the information while still in our marriage. But when we think back like that, I don't know. I've said this to my niece. Are you really going to treat your burns when you're standing in the fire? How do you treat your burns when you're standing in the fire? Yeah. So I don't know if I had been able to get clear thinking being in that, if I had been able to see all that was going on being in that.
The patterns.
Yeah.
The patterns.
Yeah, I wasn't even, it took me 3 years past that point to even figure it out.
Did he realize how bad it was? That you were ready to leave?
No. I had been considering it for about a year, and he didn't know. And so I was wondering at first why I was handling it so well, because it seemed like the breakup didn't really bother me all that well. Losing my children and like breaking up the family, that was the thing that I had to grieve the most.
That was the hardest thing.
But right. I figured out I had started grieving the loss of my marriage a year prior, because I was getting ready. Right. I had one foot out the door. So I realized I started that grieving process a year prior. He started it that day.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And then he of course started the action, the tactics of control.
That life skills, Jenny.
Because there's a whole anger pack in there. I think there was a whole set of DVDs.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in the anger ones because, as you probably know, anger is a secondary emotion. And so underneath it is usually sadness, I think, or fear. And so getting to the root of the anger can be really revealing.
Melissa, where did you find out that anger is a secondary emotion?
Just from my counseling program, probably. Okay. I was trained as a counselor and learned all sorts of stuff like that. And so getting to the root is important. And I just read a book called How We Love that I think I shared with you, Jenny. Yeah. And it's talking about attachment theory and going back to childhood and certain styles of love, they call them. Love styles are like with attachment theory, it would be, say, anxious attachment. And underneath that would be these 2 styles that they talk about in the book. And one of them is really has a lot of anger. And so I'm trying to understand it better because it's actually the style I have. And I don't think of myself as having a lot of anger, but I do have like sadness and fear. And so I have some things to kind of uncover still.
Well, I have a book that might help you too. It's actually, my husband ended up buying it. I think I told you about it. I had to dig it out from underneath all his papers. But this is a good resource. It's Anger, Taming a Powerful Emotion. It's by Gary Chapman.
Oh,
Gary
Chapman wrote the 5 love languages.
Yep.
Yeah, I like his writing.
Yeah.
See, there's a reason for this, Jenny.
Oh, I know. It's
to share with others.
And it's baby steps, we have to have things brought to our mind again. And the Holy Spirit does that through the Bible too.
Mm-hmm. I had a book, one pastor, I don't know if he gave it to me or if I borrowed it and never got it back. I don't know. It was called 2 Steps Forward, 1 Step Back. I don't remember. I think I still have it. I don't know who the author is, but it's true. It's baby steps.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can send it to you on Messenger too. I just put in there the link to this life skills. Kathy actually introduced me to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing story. There's a movie that goes along with it that was it starred John Ritter. I watched it. It is
really?
So
is it on
good.
There?
Oh,
I
yeah.
haven't seen it.
It's on Prime Video if you have that. And it's free on Prime Video. It comes with Prime Video. So yeah, and it's the story about it's this guy's family story. He beat his wife, but it's an amazing story because he's kind of like realizing it in the moment. He doesn't like what he has just done, and he leaves his whole family to go live with a girlfriend. And then he ends up doing the same thing to her. And one night they got into a fight and he almost killed her. And
oh boy.
So, he's facing 15 to 20, and that'll wake you up real fast.
Yeah.
And her attorney, the girlfriend's attorney, came to him and said she doesn't want to press charges, but she will. And he said, under one condition, you go to this group and you get help and you go through the program and you complete it. He said she will not press charges. You drop out of that group, you don't complete it, she will press charges. And he said, you can get an attorney and fight it, but my guess is you're not going to win. So he went to the group and it changed his life. It completely changed his life. They divorced and then they remarried.
I remember reading that.
So it's based on a true story?
It's based on a true story.
Oh, yeah.
And so this couple started this group, Life Skills.
Yeah.
And he died in 2017. And in 2017, one of his daughters took it over.
Oh, really?
I would be interested in that.
Yeah. There's resources on the website.
Yes.
Now, to do the class in person, my youngest daughter did it. It was like it's a financial commitment, and time consuming too, but it's very in depth. I've looked at the material that she did, and it's awesome. But it's a financial obligation. It's not cheap. But the website, I didn't realize how many resources they have on that website, because I was looking at it after I told you, you were asking me, and then I went on the website. I thought, oh, wow, I didn't know all this stuff was here.
Yeah. I want to get the anger DVDs, and then there was another one. I actually watched, there are a few YouTube videos where he's lecturing about the brain. That was fascinating.
I remember that in the Kelly's, she had a huge binder of all this information, but I remember seeing something like that about how the brain works. Yeah. It's excellent.
That's why I asked you, Melissa, because that is one of the things he said in one of his lectures, is that anger is a secondary emotion. He sought out to figure out what was happening in his brain when he went into these rages. And so he educated himself, and he actually got his PhD too, but
Is this a DVD then about the brain?
He has a series that is on the brain that is a DVD set, and then he has a series on anger, and then there are a few books they've written too.
Right. Yeah.
If you can message me his name, I'll look it up. I have to listen to books on Audible, but I could watch DVDs.
Sure.
Yeah, life skills. Yeah, you go to the website and yeah, well, you can pass that on to her.
I'll give you the website and I'll give you his name.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you can look up his name on YouTube and find his videos there too.
Okay.
Oh, you can on YouTube
Yeah.
too. Is that okay? All right. Yeah, I could do that too.
I love things about the brain, so I would be interested in that.
Yeah, that's why when Kathy sent it to me, I'm like, oh, I eat this stuff up. I love it.
Yeah, I love it's fascinating.
It is. I love combining psychology, science, and the Bible. Like that is my jam.
Yeah. I'm very similar. It's just amazing, like how God created the brain and He created the body to heal. And so, like, as you learn and understand different things about yourself, the brain can heal and the brain can be transformed.
Exactly.
And the neuroplasticity concept where like the brain is flexible, like it can change.
Yes.
Why else would God have in the Bible, all sorts of things about set your mind on things above, to change your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Paul Hegstrom is his name. He literally connects why God says what he said. Like he will explain from a scientific and physiological perspective why God says renewal of the mind. It's literally when we create a habit, a new habit, it literally creates a new branch in our brain. So it's like a new pathway.
So it kind of replaces the old one.
It replaces the old. So that's why they say you can't just stop a habit. You have to replace it with a new one. You actually have to create a new pathway, and your brain will actually create a sheath that will protect that pathway over time.
Yeah.
So it is fascinating.
And even like I learned that as you think about it, like whatever the new goal is, that helps like form the neural pathway.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that. Dr. Caroline Leaf. Do you know that name?
No. Often
you should write that down. It's just leaf like a autumn leaf, Leaf, but she is a Christian like neuroscientist and she has a couple of good books. Something like Switch on Your Brain or something switch. And I read her stuff just on Facebook and Instagram, and it's just fascinating.
So, Raising Parents for Children resources. I have a community membership that is $31 a month right now. That will give you access to all of my products. It'll give you access to group coaching, which I mentioned down below. So Kathy, I think maybe you and I have talked about this a little bit. So my vision is that we will continue to gain members. And as we gain members, we're going to have weekly group sessions. And I will facilitate those sessions. But as we grow and as we raise up the mothers may then want to facilitate. So they can break off into another group and facilitate that group. Because we wouldn't want the groups to get too large. I mean, it's
hard. Yeah.
It is. It's such an intimate topic. People need to have the time and they need to have that attention.
And you find out what kind of categories they're dealing with,
Yeah. Yeah, because they really are all different too.
Right. Everybody's story is different. Right.
Yeah. Some of them have small children and they're dealing with divorce, and you have an adult child that's estranged.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
And of course, I've got informative articles on there. Melissa, you could certainly go onto my website. Those are actually, you don't even have to be a member to look at those. You can look at those now because they're not mine. So when you go on to my website and go to resources, I link it to another website. So since those
that's
aren't
on
mine,
the Healing Grounds.
yeah, Healing Grounds. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm selling one-on-one coaching sessions. We're doing, of course, the bi-weekly webinars. The webinars are free. My coaching sessions are not. I do have a coupon in one of my emails I'm providing for a free first session. But then beyond that, it would be, these are the prices. So, so the one-on-one coaching allows people to enter into a safe place to receive perspective, receive a personalized plan for healing, because like you said, everyone is different. Receive feedback along the way to ensure forward progress, build personal awareness. I think we've done that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Achieve a deeper level of learning. Gain confidence in knowing you are initiating and implementing your own healing. So these are my prices. And then here we are. Does anybody know the #1 manipulation tactic used by narcissists? It was mentioned in the presentation, by the way.
#1. Their ego? No.
That is definitely the big picture. I think all of it comes from the ego.
I don't know. I would guess control, but I don't know if that was in your presentation.
Yeah. Nanette guessed bullying, and that is definitely an aspect. Oh. But the #1 tactic, the thing that most people talk about when it comes to narcissists, is gaslighting.
I was thinking that too, but I'm like, oh, she's not going to want a fancy term.
Yeah, so gaslighting. And I mean, if you don't know what gaslighting is,
I don't. I've heard it, but not really.
It's beyond the scope of this this webinar. So Kathy, you'll just have to tune in again to get more information later on a later webinar. I will do a webinar on gaslighting for sure.
Okay.